Sleep is an essential function that allows your body and mind to recharge, leaving you refreshed and alert when you wake up. Healthy sleep also helps the body remain healthy and stave off diseases. Without enough sleep, the brain cannot function properly. This can impair your abilities to concentrate, think clearly, and process memories. But, have you ever thought about what might happen to you if you went sleepless for 30 days non-stop? Supposedly, in the 1940s, during the Soviet era, a certain group of scientists set out to find out the results of 30 sleepless days and nights. It was during this period that the Soviet researchers believed they had created a stimulant capable of keeping a soldier sleepless for a long time. That's because every nation, such as Germany, the USA, and England, were looking for ways to win World War II, and the Russian sleep experiment was the Soviet Union's strategic weapon. Before rendering it safe, they decided to test it on human subjects. Since it was during the World War, finding the test subjects wasn't a hassle as there were plenty of war prisoners. The researchers designed the scientific experiment to run for 15 days, upon which they shall have discovered if it's best for use on their soldiers. While the gas chamber, where the airborne stimulant would be released, was under prep, 5 prisoners of war were misinformed that if they could make 30 days within the gas chamber, they'll be set free, and so they agreed. Generally, it's the military that sanctioned this Soviet sleep experiment. The Soviet Union researchers locked the prisoners in a sealed chamber. Everything they required, like running water, a toilet, and a bed but without bedding, were in the chamber. The researchers continuously administered the stimulant gas to the test subjects to make them stay awake. At the same time, they would monitor if the oxygen levels were fine. They went through the first 3 days of the experiment without experiencing any problems. The men appeared to be in good health. They conversed with one another. The experiment was going well, and the research had progressed. However, things took a darker turn on the 4th day when the prisoners started speaking of horrors they've witnessed at war, among other increasingly traumatic incidents. Although it was so unusual, the researchers were not concerned. On the 5th day, things became much worse when the prisoners fell into psychosis. Apart from talking to themselves, they started seeing things that weren't there. Also, they become paranoid about their fellow prisoners and would often whisper on the microphones in the chamber about other test subjects. Their minds eventually began to deceive them. After the 6th day, their thoughts turned against them. They experienced horrific hallucinations that they felt every second of. And this time, they caught the audience's attention. In the provided conditions, the researcher figured that the behavior was out of the ordinary. The researcher spoke about what triggered this behavior. It was possible that the sleep loss or the gas itself was to blame. There were a few words said, but no progress was made. They decided to continue the experiment to try to figure out what was causing the problem. Days passed, and the Russian sleep experiment became increasingly terrible. On the 9th day mark, 2 prisoners started screaming while running around like headless animals. They were going insane, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. The screams were so loud that they almost broke their vocal cords. Suddenly, out of the blue, there was instant silence. There was no screaming, and even then, other test subjects stopped talking. The researchers yelled over the speakers that they were on their way to check in, and that if the subjects behaved, one of them would be released immediately. One of the chambered subjects murmured into the microphone, telling the researchers that they no longer desired freedom. For the chamber, the gas supply was completely blocked, and fresh air was blown into the chamber to replace the gas. The inmates began to scream and cry for the gas. The researchers were concerned that the subjects had become addicted to the stimulant. They didn't have much of a choice except to enter the room. That's when they discovered their prisoners in a horrifying condition. One of the prisoners was dead. The dead prisoner was severely mutilated, just like the other 4 surviving test subjects. Their abdomen was ripped open, and the flesh torn off. The blood was streaming from the exposed finger bones. They'd lost a lot of blood. Their wounds appeared to have been caused by themselves. The researchers fled, alerting the guards to take the patients into the operation room. The prisoners attacked the soldiers as soon as they entered the cell. One of the attackers slashed the throat of a soldier. Even when a prisoner bled out fighting, he still pleaded for the stimulant in his last moments. When the prisoners were apprehended, they were given a hefty dose of sedatives. However, The sedative did not work for some reason. So, they had to be chained to the beds. The doctors attempted to treat the first patient, but when given an anesthetic, they accidentally killed him. So, they chose to operate on the others without sedation. Doctors discovered 9 fractured bones and practically every major muscle torn apart as they attempted to treat a patient. The other wasn't in the best of shape either. During the surgery, the surgeons overheard them saying bizarre things. They kept asking for the stimulant. At that time, a former military operative in the room proposed that the test subjects be returned to the chamber for further testing. That option only made sense at the moment. Only when the subjects were on stimulant withdrawal did they get aggressive. They were simply paranoid but not destructive while on the stimulant. By now, 2 out of the 5 test subjects were dead. The remaining 3 were being treated for their injuries in preparation for returning to the chamber. However, a shocking discovery by the EEG monitor showed that each test subject was brain dead. One of the 3 prisoners fell asleep and died instantly just before the chamber was sealed. The lead Russian sleep experiment researcher shot another prisoner. The count was now down to 1. The scientist rushed inside the chamber. They were standing over the body of the deceased patient when they overheard the final patient talking to himself. In that facility, there were 2 researchers and a guard. One of the researchers grew paranoid and pulled out his gun, aiming it towards the patient. The guard jumped to his feet to prevent him from murdering the prisoner. The researcher killed the guard and then opened fire on the patient. Surprisingly, the patient survived. The researcher's paranoia worsened. "What are you?" he asked with his voice shaking. The prisoner responded as, "The monster you created," before being shot for a final time. The Russian sleep experiment rumor first surfaced on the internet a few years ago. On the internet, the rumors became stories. It has even inspired a few short films. However, it was most likely never a reality. In all scientific history, there has never been a stimulant that promised to keep its consumers awake for 30 days. And it is not like stimulants to turn their users into immortal wild beasts. During the Soviet era, other nations believed that the Soviets conducted secret experiments. While this might be true, the Russian sleep experiment was not one of them.